Right. My name is Hamid Poor. I will be your lecturer for the duration of the hour. Now, hour is very hopeful. Seriously, if we can finish this within the hour, the uni should give me a medal on that alone. If I go over an hour, I'll let you guys know, and if you need to go to more important things in real life, please do. If not, then crack on. Hopefully, we'll finish this within the hour. Now, we're covering races and, of course, ship types. We're going to be covering a tad about armor, engagement types, and a few other things. So it's going to be a hefty class. We're going to go through it as best we can, and hopefully we'll get there. Now, to start off, since we have everyone in lecture.edu, I'm going to go ahead and put a link, and I need people to open it. And if you cannot open this link, you need to let me know. Please stand by. Right, let's crack on with the link. So open the link if you have not already. So let's start off with what are the major races in Eval 9. Now, despite what some people might tell you, initially, it actually matters what you pick. It, however, does not matter to a point where you're totally fluffed if you pick, for example, Minmatar and train it for 6 months. That is not a problem. But it does matter. Now, starting off, I have tried a bit of humor. We're going to start off with just describing what they are and who they are. We will not be getting into lore. Lore is a different subject. We do not have time for it. Though, if you have time to read about it, they're quite fun. Now, starting off with the Galente Federation. On the picture I have provided will be the far leftist to the screen. Now, they are big, of course, as I've written, on freedom, democracy, and they generally believe in rainbows and unicorns. That's a joke. The Galente, for that, is one of the major factions that people choose when they start off. Usually people give 30 to 25 minutes when they start off the game to try to find out which of these factions they like. And most people I know, or I have known, go for the Galente on the grounds of freedom and democracy. Some, of course, regret this later on. The Amar Empire, big on their religious ethos and generally religious lives and their slaves, is the further to the right. Colors are important. At some point, you will realize that the Galente are a darkish, kind of bluish, kind of pale greenish color, while the Amar is a golden. It's just wonderful, golden wonderfulness. We have the Caldari Corporation, which basically, if Apple was in space, you would have Caldaris, big on corporate money and etc. etc. You can do the reading on them later. They, as we will later on tell you, they are big on PvE as a whole. Last but not least, the Minmatars. The Minmatars are predominantly known for their rusty ships. They're horrendously ugly and spit-patched style of ships. And to my opinion, this is my personal opinion, one of the best PvP ships around to have. Now, I'm going to put a second link in. Please stand by. Now, if you click on this link, another Word doc should come up. Well, a picture of it anyways. Do excuse the typos, of course. Now, when I said factions from, well, races, from here on we will refer to them as factions, are important when you start off, or generally important, is because of their traits. Each faction has its own unique traits. When you move on to the pirate factions, it will be a combination of these traits that will manifest in, of course, pirate faction ships. So it's good to know from the very start what they are. Starting off from the Galente, since just we like Galente for now, the most important traits of the Galente, not necessarily all their traits, but the most important we will start today and not overload you with a vast range of knowledge, are the three main bullet points I've put for the Galente. Weapon types, hybrid torrents and drones are their predominant weapons. When I say they're predominant weapons, it does not mean that you cannot put any different type of weapon system on a Galente ship. You can, but most of the times they are not bonused for it. So they go with hybrid torrents. Those are rails and blasters. Now, drones are a wonderful thing. You will find that if you do any sort of PvE, drones are your friends. They cost not so much money-wise when you use them, unless you lose them. And of course, they are recyclable. You can sell them later on. The Galente's hybrid is a great thing in many ways, and not so much in many others when it comes to PvE and PvP. We'll work on that later on. The second of the bullet points is armor focused. Predominantly Galente ships are armor focused ships. Not that you cannot put shields on them, but because of their many low slots, armor is the way to go. Now, being armor as they are, they're usually heavier and bulkier and slower than some other ships. And as we will later on discuss in styles of engagement, you really have to commit to an engagement if you're an armored ship, especially if you have hybrid blasters on and your range is just horrible. Now, moving on from that. Third is the unique faction E-War type. With the Galante, it is sensor dampening, or just commonly referred to as damped, or dampening, or being damped. I am damped is a usual sentence when engaging with Galante rats during PvE. Sensor dampeners, predominantly what they do is they affect the range of your engagement. So if you have a gun that shoots out of 10k, you put one damp on that gun and it's now half that, if not more, that range is lost. So getting damped by 4 or 5 ships gives you the range of attack range of fluff all, and it's generally a really bad thing, especially in PvP. Sorry. Moving on to Amar. Amar and Galante share quite a few things in common. That's why I put them together. Amar's weapon types are energy torrents. Now the key word is torrents. We will come to this. There's a point later on that'll be of importance. Torrents, like hybrid torrents, you put them on the gun and they use a range of tracking bonuses and tracking, etc. to shoot their targets. Energy torrents are good and bad, again, like the hybrid. And like many things in EVE Online, they're situational, so it always depends on what you use them for. We'll get into these in details. There are drone boats and they are armor focused, like the Galante, meaning that generally they are fatter and, of course, heavier. On the plus side, both the Galante and the Amar, being armored, will have more effective HP compared to their 2 other counterparts. The E-War of the Amar is the weapon disruption, commonly the tracking disruption, and of course their unique, wonderful thing, the energy neutralizers, or referred to either as newts or nosses. We love the Amar, and you trust me, you love the Amar on that alone, newts and nosses. They play a significant role in PvP, and surprisingly in PvE at times, believe it or not. Now, moving on from Amar. So Galante and Amar, similar, though they hate each other, they share quite a lot of similarities. Third on our list is the Caldari. Now, the weapon type from the start is missiles. So the Caldari are different from all other factions and races on the grounds of their missile usages, meaning they do not use torrents, they use missiles, launchers, etc. They are shield focused, which makes them very different to their Galante and Amar friends and enemies. I will tell you why in a moment. And they have ECM disruption. Now, ECM as a whole, I'm sure you know, give or take, that it just literally fluffs with your tracking. Sorry, excuse me, lock. So 1 minute you have somebody locked and you're about to murder them horribly. The next minute, a Blackbird puts 3 ECM jams on you and you have lost targets and you are perma-jammed and you literally break your keyboard. It is a thing, it happens. The newts, you will hate the newts. You will hate ECM jams, you will hate the newts. They will ruin your life. Once we get the ship types and we bring the Ashimu up, I will tell you why we hate newts. Or we love them, depending on if you're on the wrong side of them or not. Now, back to the Caldari. The Caldari, or the Apple Corporation in space, the money-gobbling bastards, they like shield. Predominantly, they are shield-focused, their ships. Meaning, when you are fitting their defensive mods and armor and etc., you will be putting shield mods on. Mostly because they have a lot of mid-utility slots compared to low slots. And ECM jammers are a thing, and they are an effective thing. Bear in mind, though, if you bring 5 or 6 or 8 Blackbirds to a fight, you will be labeled as the douches of EVE Online by most corporations. So just don't do it. Last but not least, the Minmatar, or commonly referred to as Winmatar. Not by everyone, of course. Now, Minmatars use, the weapon systems are projectile turrets, again, they fall in the category of torrents, and they actually can use missiles at times, so they do have missile boats. Or believe it or not, a combination of 2 in some of their ships and some of their battle cruisers. They are shield focused, meaning their mid slots are many and much. They do have a good balance of low slots as well in some of their ships. Their general E-War category is target painters and webifiers, status webifiers, commonly referred to as painters and webbers. Target painters as a whole are those mods that bloom your signature. If you're a small frigate with a 50 whatnot radius, 3-4 damps on you, you become the size of a cruiser. 2-3 more damps on you, you become the size of a battleship. Tell me.
Sorry, Cat? Damps on.
You
get bigger by paints.
Paints, thank you, Cat. Thank you for that. That's why I have you around. Nice. So a few paints on you, you become the size of a battleship, and you will die horribly. And yes, Theo, exactly. Caldari does use hybrids as well. I think predominantly battle cruisers as well. Although, to be fair, their rail, what's their faces, is not a usual thing. I think Naga, it's the Naga. Correct me if I'm wrong. The Naga is a thing, but it's not a big thing. Right. Now, so far, we have covered very roughly the traits of each faction. Now, pirate factions are a tad different. They're a combination of these, and hopefully, if we have time, we will get to them later. Right now, I'm going to take a moment. We're going to talk about armor-focused and shield-focused. Depending on the playstyle you have, and playstyles are a thing, we'll get to these in a moment as well, playstyles, you might be one of those people that likes to get in somebody's face and beat the shit out of them, or keep a well-suited range and shoot them from afar. It depends on the character. Also, believe it or not, it's all about the situation. Engagements in EVE Online, as people will tell you, is 80%, 90% situational. It's what the enemy is using and what you have. Can you counter? That's all what PvP is. So, as a whole, shield-focused ships have the ability to dictate range more effectively than armored, sluggish ships, such as the Galante or the Amar. In that effect, they are more effective. So you will see a lot of people, especially in solo PvP, take out shield ships just to be able to kite out of a comfortable range of 20 or 30, and if things go sideways, bail out quickly. The downside to that is that, unfortunately, their effective HP is not very high, and the moment they get scrams or caught or a few webs on them, they are dead very quickly. While as Omar or Galante ships can overheat their hardeners, overheat their reps, armor reps, and survive a tad longer during heavy situations. So, again, like all things in EVE, it depends. It's an if situation, what's happening and what you need. All right, please open the following link. It's very simple, very short, very small link. Now, again, I'm sure most of you know, but we'll have to cover this nonetheless to be thorough. Who likes who among these races and factions? Now, predominantly the Galente and the Minmatars are friends. They like each other, mostly because Galente likes freedom and democracy, and the Minmatars were used to be slaves to the Amar, etc., and they really like their freedom as a whole, so they kind of like pair up and be buddies. While the Caldari and the Amar are kind of like iffy toward each other. They don't hate each other, but they're not the best of pals either. Now, this is important. Why? Standing, faction standing. This is predominantly for people who want to do PvE. Now, if you're doing, for example, let me think, missions. If you're doing missions, and you do a lot of missions for the Galente Federation, and you get your standings to a whooping 7 point something, you will notice that your standing with Amar and the Caldari, I think, at some point will go down to a minus something, and they actually might shoot you in their territory just because you've done too many missions for the Galante and you're too buddy and too chummy with their enemies. So if you are a heavy mission runner and you rely on mission running for your ISK, and you want to do those storyline missions, the key one is storyline missions, make sure you balance out your storyline missions between the factions so you don't get too many minuses for them. And for the love of God, do not shoot faction ships. Don't go taking a contract off Calente and shooting Amar ships in high sec. This is bad. That hurts your standing. I'll give you one more link and then we're going to move on to something else. This is very rough, very general. So, Galante and Amar, especially when they're fitted for armor, are brawlers. Now, the terminology, I'm sure you know, it refers to getting in somebody's face and shooting them either with projectiles, with missiles, doesn't mean rockets in particular, and of course with hybrid. And it is a very effective mode of engagement, especially on gates or near stations, somewhere where you can force your enemy to engage at your distance. So if you can force a group of players to engage in close quarter brawls, then having armor is very good. For those of you who are planning on becoming pirates in low sec, armor is a very good thing in low sec piracy. They love armor, they use armor quite a lot. Because they cannot get bombed by stealth bombers, armor is a big thing down there, and slow sluggish ships that dictate combat on gates or on stations or on passes or etc. are a big thing. Not so much in, of course, nullsec, where you can get bombed to death. You'll find many major corporations and many major alliances will use Kaiden ships in nullsec. Not necessarily all, but many. The Caldari and Minmatar, of course, are Kaiden as a whole. The Minmatar is a fantastic faction. If you like dictating range, they have a vast range of ships that are fantastically fast. They're great to kite, and they also have the ability to put dual prop mods on, both afterburners and MWDs, so you can get the hell out of an engagement if things are looking hairy. Hopefully we'll get to these when we're discussing ship types. We're going to put another link up in a second. Please stand by. You should have a little GIF come up with ship types. And starting from the very top, you have your frigates, destroyers, cruisers, all the way down to battleships. Terminology, these are referred to as subcaps, subcapital ships, and they are a big thing. If you are big in PvP, if you really like PvPing, most of your life is going to be spent subcapping. The reason being as follows. Now, let's start from the top, from frigates. Now, I've put a few words for each, not necessarily all of it, but generally, it describes this category of ships as a whole. So, frigates, we all know, super fast. They are, however, squishy. Predominantly used for tackle, whether it be a T1 frigates or interceptors. We'll get to the ship tree in a moment, so don't worry about it. They are surprisingly popular in faction warfare, especially if you're a learner and you want to learn solo PvP. Your frigates are your friends, your best friends. They are not, however, you're the best of friends, because being squishy as they are, you tend to die before you realize where you went wrong. So cruisers, if you can afford cruisers, go for cruisers. The thing most people also won't tell you about frigates, they are horrendously dangerous in numbers. 5 or 6, 7 frigates who know what they're doing can easily bring down a battleship. Easily. In numbers, they are ridiculously dangerous. I'm going to give you an example. During the Great War of the Bees, the most recent wars, now, Mitanni's little friends were vastly outnumbered by the money badgers. What they decided to do after losing a lot of cruisers to, of course, the money badgers, is they went into smaller ships, and they were surprisingly more effective in the small interceptor fleets compared to if they were forced to engage in close combat. They would have died very horribly, very quickly. However, they managed to maintain range, and in numbers, they were, if not effective, efficiently annoying. They were very annoying, and they did the job of harassing a lot of the Sovnal people quite well. So frigates are a thing. They're important. We love them. Now, destroyers. I've only put a line for destroyers. We're going to get into destroyers in a detail in a moment. They come in 3 flavors: bubble, jump, and downright annoying. Bubbles are referred to interdictors. We will again go on the ship tree in a moment, and we will discuss them. I'm sure everybody here knows what a bubble is, or they call them interdictor bubbles. Well, no, sorry, that's what dicks. Beg your pardon. Generally, bubbles. The command destroyers or the jump destroyers, or whatever you want to call them, are the ones that jump a group of people 100 kilometers in EA direction that they are facing. And the annoying one I'm referring to, T3Ds, the Tech 3 destroyers, which again come in 4 different types depending on the faction, and they have their usages in places, especially the Svipple. Moving on to cruisers. Now, cruisers as a whole are the bread and butter of PvP. This is where 90% of all PvP in its best of form and most effective form happens. There's just a vast range of them. We'll get them in a moment. We cannot sadly discuss all of them in details. We'll just give you a general gist of what kind of cruisers they are, and depending on what faction you get into, what you should expect of them. Battle cruisers, surprisingly, I was a tad disappointed as I grew in my EVE career to find that as wonderful as they are not really better than cruisers as a whole in PvP. You will get major alliances that will use doctrines, which are battle cruiser doctrines. But again, cruisers is the way to go. Battleships, my experience so far, they're wonderful for PvE. You want to run missions, you want to do incursions, you want to do a vast range of PvE related activities, especially with the blinky pirate ones. They're wonderful. They are, however, a bit too sluggish and ineffective in PvP. My experience so far. I could be wrong. Other people will tell you differently. There are, however, videos out there of solo battleship pilots going out and doing magic. So don't take my word for it. Go Google it. From here on, you have your capitals, and then you use your supers, referred to as the Titans. Capital class ships are, generally speaking, your dreadnoughts and your carriers, which are highly effective for bashing majorly massive structures such as passes. Dreadnoughts are predominantly pass bashing structures. Anybody tells you otherwise, listen to them, but then again, they really love using them to kill bosses or sticks at the very least. Carriers, I put carrier ratters, that's a joke on my part. They are used a lot in PvE, believe it or not, especially in soft null and null. They are highly effective, especially I think with the recent changes, they're highly effective as well in PvP. I have very little experience in this, so I'm not going to go and tell you anything else beyond that. They are, however, expensive. They are exceptionally expensive, so blingy, don't lose them because they're just bad. Prime example was a chap that joined the Norfolk campus, a year ago, I think. Four months into the game, he decided to burn £400 to buy himself a dreadnought, a couple other things, plus a character, and lost it to our Rotocapella friends right off the PC9 on dock in a glorious and embarrassing manner. It went on Reddit, it went on YouTube, and that was a shameful day for me as a whole, because it brought the NSC. Moving on. So mind your capitals. Supers are Titans as a whole, and they come in 4 different types depending on the faction you use them. Recent changes, I've now put 5 pirate faction Titans and capitals on the market. Not yet at the very least, but soon. I know nothing about them, so go Google that. One of the things you will realize when you move up the chain, the food chain, onto major corporations, is that Titans are predominantly logistic ships, believe it or not. And when I mean logistic, not mean as logi as in reps, as in logistics, as they will jump 40 or 50 or 60 man fleet, 40, 30 jumps wherever in the universe. And when you need to move a vast amount of people for a certain engagement, they are a ridiculously good asset to have. So if you are planning on getting into supers and Titans, know that people will love you. They will love you just because you can jump a whole bunch of ships, 50 odd jumps out. Let's talk about tiers. Now, ships come in tier. I'm just going to type this for you. Gentlemen, I've just gone ahead and lazy as I am, I've just written T1, T2, and T3. Your ships as a whole, you already know this, of course. We're going to just briefly cover it. T1 ships are the ships that generally are the cheapest, whatever size they are, and you will lose a vast range of them learning to PvE or PvP. Your Tech 2 ships are generally your more expensive, more buffied, more tougher class of ships. And your Tech 3s are going to be the predominantly, I'm referring to your T3Ds, or Tech 3 destroyers. We will go to them in a moment. And of course, your Tech 3 cruisers, which are just fantastic all around. Now, if you haven't got into your first Tech 3 yet, don't really rush, because you're going to need some good support skills if they are to be effective. Do not do like some people do, half a year in, decide to train into a Tech 3 Proteus and then lose it horribly. That's just bad. Make sure you have your support skills up. Right, ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and open your ship tree. It used to be called the ISIS. Yes, they have changed it, of course, since then for obvious reasons. Now, let's just go with, why the hell not? Let's go with Galente. So go ahead and enter the Galente Federation ship tree thing. So, and let's start off right off your rookie ship from your frigates. Now, again, you've already trained most of these. You already know what they are. I'm just going to briefly touch on. We've already covered the sizes. You already know what a subcap frigate is. Now we're going to look at Galente. You already know that Galente have bonuses for tracking disruption. Excuse me, damps, tracking damps. And they are happy on their armor fittings. This again does not mean that they cannot fit shield. Now we're going to describe and go over the different types of frigates. These are universal across the board when it comes to your major corporations and factions, and pretty much do the same thing with a tad difference, of course, with each faction. Right off the bat, you have your navies. You'll have your navies this, your navies that. You have your navy frigates, your navy cruisers, and then you have your navy battle cruisers, each unique in its form, and to be fair, a tad better than your average frigate, not necessarily better than your assault frigate, depending on situation. All you have to do is just click on whichever one you like, and from there on, it'll give you details. Predominantly, I will tell you from the Gallente, the Federation Navy Comet is a superstar in faction warfare, frigate class, of course, and it comes in a vast range of either armored or structure tanked, rail or blaster, and also uses drones. So it's a if you have a notion that you want to do a lot of faction warfare, go ahead and train heavily into the Navy Comet if you're Gallente, and you will see that it does quite a lot of good things. Interceptors, right up from Navy frigates, are interceptors. They are fantastic. Whether you like tackling or not, they're just fantastic to have. You want to get into your interceptor, at the very least, you want to have as a taxi. If you're going to be moving through null sec or low sec quite a lot, you want to get into an interceptor. They warp faster, they align faster, they're just fantastic. If you really like tackling, get this to 5, and you would do wonders. Surprisingly, if you actually like running pirate faction storyline missions, interceptors are a way to go. They will allow you to do faction missions in null seg where everyone wants to kill you. And usually speaking, when people see an interceptor running around, they're going to presume and assume that you are instant warp and stabbed. So they're not going to really bother with you. So it's a good thing to have if you want to go low or null as a whole. Now, moving on from that, assault frigates. Assault frigates used to be a big thing. That was before the Tech 3 destroyers were introduced. They used to be the predominant mode of solid engagement, had great DPS, great tank. However, with the introduction of the Tech 3Ds a while ago, they are semi-obsolete. Not to say that they're bad, they're still good to have. A lot of the boys, as Kat will tell you, in the NSC use them. Lanik, for example, used them to murder a vast range of about 300 people for a good 6-7 months. So they're good to train into. They use their weapon systems effective, and they're tad cheap compared to some of their cruiser counterparts. Covert ops. It's a must train without question. You're going to need at the very least a stealth bomber, whether it be it a Nemesis or whatever, and you want to be able to throw bombs. The E-UNI or major other corporations use bomb runs a lot, so it's a nice thing to get into. If you're into exploration as a whole and you want to make your money exploring, it's a fantastic way to do stuff. Not necessarily always the best way, but it is very fun. The Helios or your Johnny Covert op of the choice is fantastic. Electronic attack ships. Remember I told you about that little E-wars each faction had. It is manifested in whole in their electronic attack ships. I'm going to give you the example of the Keras, for example. The Keras is bonused for sensor dampeners, and of course it gets a solid bonus for scrams, warp scrams and warps, meaning that if you are running a small gang, you put one Keras in it, you point somebody 20 out and harass his life while everybody else shoots him to death, and he is helpless if he has no friends, unless of course he's a missile boat. That's a different story. Logistic frigates. Now, most of you will look at logistic frigates and think, why is this a thing? Believe it or not, in low sec, small gang, logistic frigates are wonderful, are fantastic to have. The king of logistic frigates in low sec will be the Deacon, in my opinion. The Deacon is an Omar logistic frigate, and trust me, a lot of low sec people, especially if they take engagements near gates in low sec, will rely heavily on them for reps and support. And it's just all around. So if you train into it and get it to 5, you will not be sorry that you had it in low sec. Less so in null, though. Moving on to destroyers. Now, destroyers were predominantly made to kill frigates. At this point in life, a couple of good destroyer pilots will kill anything. They're that effective. Also, I'm sure if you've been in high sec, the catalyst is a major red flag for most miners. They are very heavily used to gank high sec anything. That, and of course, its Minotaur counterpart, the Thrasher. Moving on, we are all on the Gallente tree. So moving on into dictors or dictors. I cannot emphasize the importance these ships play in nullsec. They are crucial. A good Dictor pilot is an essential part of any massive fleet as well. Imagine this. Imagine the following scenario. You have an FC that's off for an engagement 20 jobs out of nullsec. He is leading a 40, 50, or 100-man fleet cruiser size, and they are a bit slow. Before they can reach the target of engagement, they run into a very unfriendly fleet of 50 or 60 odd other cruisers that are thinking, well, let's kill them. Now, the FC thinks, I don't want to take this engagement because I'm up for another engagement to kill a post or a citadel or whatnot. So he presses on towards his destination. Now, I have seen fantastic Dictor pilots that have, without the FC's input of any sort, they have put bubbles gate to gate and gate to gate behind their own fleet and hindered the progression of the enemy fleet. It's fantastically effective. So Dictors, wonderful. Other scenarios of Dictors in nullsec, especially in massive engagements, is that they are crucial to pin down massive cruiser fleets, or less so frigate, but massive cruiser or battle cruiser fleets. They do what is commonly referred to as a drive-by bubble, or several bubbles, where there's YouTube clips on this. So make a note of this, go watch some of these people do their magic, where they will bubble the entire fleet, enemy fleet, and whether the friendly fleet is in Alpha, for example, Hurricane fleet or whatnot, they will make it very easy for the friendly fleets to take out the enemy fleet. Again, we can have a class on Dictors as a whole later on, but bear in mind, again, I cannot emphasize how important these ships are. So if you haven't trained into one, train into one. Moving on to command destroyers, they are fairly new, so and people had a lot of fun. Our very own Karth Crust had a massive amount of fun with these. They effectively will jump you or your enemy's drones, for that matter, enemy's Logi, your own tackle, 100 kilometers in any direction. Now, this could be either towards the enemy, or moving or ripping the enemy's drones or fighters and bombers away from their carriers. There is a lot to be had with these, and to be fair, it's a more of a pro kind of style of PvP flying one of these. They are wonderfully fun to fly as well. So again, if you think of training into one, not a bad way to go. Beyond that, again, Google it. Moving on to T3Ds. Very heavy in low sec, quite prominent in null sec. They replaced the assault frigates as a whole, and the Svipul as a whole, again, I'll link him if you don't know, as a whole is referred to cancer, mostly because you can fit quite a bit of tank and DPS on this little ship, and literally a fleet of 5 to 10, 20 of these can just literally destroy most small frigate size fleets. Right, moving on to cruisers. Cruisers are generally what you want to be focusing on. Get cruisers to 5. Get all the cruisers to 5 if you can, and you will not go wrong. Depending on whichever faction you start out, whichever faction you like, and your playstyle, you will be training them to 5 quite quickly, and do so. The bonuses they get are fantastic. So train your cruisers to 5. Recon ships and your Tech 2 branch as a whole will be a tad more expensive. So if you're low on money, avoid them for now, and just play around with your Tech 1 ships, or even the Navy ones are not horrendously expensive. Your cruisers predominantly will either be set for Brawl or Kite, and again, depending on your play style, you want to do both or either. Moving on, recon ships come in 2 flavors. The type that actually cloak, so you can warp cloak, which I think they are called. Help me out here, someone.
Cruisers that can warp cloaked. It's Stradius and T3s.
Yes. No, I think recon ships, they used to call them something else as well. Good God.
Oh yeah, recons. There are 2 types, Force Recon and what's the other one?
I think combat recons. Antti, was it combat recons that could warp cloak?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, one of them can warp cloak, and the other one is immune to D-scans. Now, that's a big thing. Immune to D-scan is a massive thing, and this is predominantly in wormholes. And so recon ships are a wonderful thing, especially for, again, wormholes. So if you like, there used to be fleets, Hong who used to take out recon fleets as well of 10, 20 non-scannable cloak keys as well. So they are a big thing. They're very fun to have. if you want to do solo hunting of miners in low sec, or generally solo hunting of frigates and destroyers in low sec, recons are your best friends. Predominantly the ones that you can cloak up. Moving on to heavy assault cruisers. This is true across the board with all your factions. Heavy assault cruisers are your bulky, tanky, all-around DPS, massively amount of reppy kind of cruisers. So you can get into serious brawls with these, and then you can tank quite a bit. The problem is the price tags. So wait until you've done a bit of PvP before you jump into these. But again, for example, a Munion fleet, the goons used to use Munion fleets quite a lot of, quite effective actually, and they will shred anything between 50 to 100 kilometers quite well, 50 or less so Munions. So they're big things. On the Galente part, for example, the Ishtar is used around quite a bit. It's both PvE and PvP friendly, so you won't go wrong training into one of these. Moving on to heavy interdictor cruisers, or Hicks, commonly referred to as Hicks. The Hicks are predominantly famous for their Hick bubbles. Like the destroyer counterpart that could bubble stuff, the Hicks could also set up what is called a Hick bubble or a Hick infinite point, which will point a ship regardless of what warp core stabs they have. They are stuck. End of story. Major and big corporations use Hicks predominantly to tackle big, nasty ships. So if, for example, you have an unfortunate Titan pilot that jumps into your system unaware that he's done so, just because he clicked the wrong button next to his jump fleet button, you will find that a lot of your friends will get into their Hicks and tackle or bubble the bejesus out of him. The reason being, the Hicks have phenomenal resists, and they can be tanked quite heavily. So if you later on you're going into major corporations, you will find that a lot of them have the prerequisite of having a Hick cruiser. Moving on, Logi cruisers. I shit you not, I actually have hearts drawn on my notes for Logi. There are two types of people in EVE Online. You're either Logi or you're not. If you're Logi, everyone loves you, and I'm talking major corporations love you, small corporations love you, just love you. Logi pilots and Logi ships as a whole are fantastic things. You will get credit on the grounds that you will not be on kill boards, but you'll have respect. And as far as the Galente goes, the Oniris is okay, but if you want to be serious in Logi, for Armor Logi, you want to go straight for the Guardian. So if you are thinking that you like Logi, you like the respect that comes with Logi, you like the dedication that comes with Logi, go straight for the Guardian. Thank you. Cat has linked the Guardian. And also major corporations for Shield Logi use the Scimitar. Also, if you're not even interested in Logi as a whole, bear in mind that if you want to do, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, I think Logi is also good to have if you want to make some money on the side for incursions. They are also big on incursions, especially shield Logis. The Scimitar is another one to have. So Guardians and Semis for armor and shield respectively are the way to go. Moving on to the last of the cruiser line, the T3, the Tech 3 Destroyer. Now again, we need a whole session alone just to talk about T3s. But I'm going to give you a general rough understanding of each one. In Galente, you have the Proteus. The Proteus excels at, believe it or not, null-sec fleets. The Money Badger Coalition predominantly destroyed the goons during the second phase of the war this year, just because they took Proteuses out with tracking disruptors and Guardian Logi, and they literally obliterated everything on the field. That's for major fleets and big fights. If you're thinking of a more clandestine approach to your playstyle, Cloaky T3 Protei in either low sec or wormholes are king. The phrase that there's always a Cloaky Proteus nearby in wormholes is an actual thing. Blaster fitted, blinged, they can push a whooping amount of damage while maintaining a good tank. Again, sadly, engagement-wise, they fall in the category of course, armored ships. So once you engage, you are committed to that engagement. So don't go losing a blingy ship, Proteus, just because you took the wrong engagement. That's moving on to Amar. Now, Amar, you have the Legion. Again, I'm going to link it for you. This fella. The Legion is the king of wormholes when it comes to its newts and nosses. If you think of running C3 sites in wormholes as well, the Legion is the way to go. The Legion has a fantastic tank, armor predominantly. It brawls okay, but what it does effectively is newt and nos the bejesus out of ships, meaning that you will be capped dry during your first minute engagement with the Legion if you have not fitted your ship properly. Or, of course, or if you're unlucky and you have fitted your ship properly, but, of course, you're not cap stable to a good degree as well. So the Legions are fantastic brawlers and neuters. In massive corporations, so in big corporations, when you take a fleet of Proteae out, say 40-man Proteae fleet out, you will have 10 Legions at the very least, and that is to newt out enemy major logi. Say, for example, the new Apostle coming out, they will get heavily neutered by Legions. So you will have an FC shouting or begging, depending on the FC, for Legion pilots. So either you go for Proteae or Legion, you will never go wrong. Moving on to Caldari. You get the good old Tengu. Now, Tengu, since the dawn of time, was or is a favorite PvE ship. Some will even joke to say EVE Online should have been called Tengu Online because of the all-around awesomeness of the Tengu. The Tengu can be fit for C3s in wormholes. It could be for level 4s. It could be for nullsec anomalies. It is just fantastic all around for PvE. On rare occasions, you can put blasters on it and bling it for solo PvP. There are a lot of videos out there for solo Tengu blasters, and they do a fantastic amount of damage, and they tank like a beast. Unless they have 2 Legions on them, they're pretty okay. A Legion versus a Tengu, the Tengu will die, depending on fitting, of course. Last but not least, you have the Loki. The Loki is a bit of an underrated T3. It is sadly not effective in any particular category, whether it be PvE or PvP, and you will not see a lot of Loki fleets going out. What it does do and it excels at is its resists. So major FCs and major corporations will be in Lokis just because they can't get alpha. And that covers our T3Ds. Battlecruisers. It doesn't really matter where you look at them. Battlecruisers are just generally slow. They're used in level 3s, level 2 mission running. They're great bait ships. I mean, what can I say? A fleet of rail Brutexes do wonders. It all depends on the situation you have and what kind of fleet you want to take out. They are more expensive than their cruiser counterparts as a whole, the Tech 1s, and predominantly their Tech 2s. The problem the Tech 2 branch of the battlecruisers have, and I'm referring to the command ships, is that they are a nightmare to train into. You'll have to train your entire leadership skill for about a year just to get into, for example, any Tech 2 battlecruiser. And for a lot of people, that is just 100 days worth of the training. For now, let's move on to battleships. Battleships as a whole, they're pretty straightforward. I told them, yes. What I just mentioned that we're having our booster changes coming up. Yes, I think you're absolutely right. With the new changes coming up, hopefully they'll be more relevant and people will like them more as a whole. But as a grounds of whether either PvP as a whole, they're not so much in demand. The exception being the Sleipnir, this ship, which is used as doctrine ships in a lot of major corporations just because that's fantastic alpha. Let's move on to battleships. The battleships are pretty standard, as in big, gigantic ships. You don't get a lot of fleets of them. They're great for level 4 missions as a whole. The sole exception to this are Black Ops. Black Ops, I'm giving an example, for example, the good one, the nice one, the Panther. I've linked in a lecture. They are predominantly used, not necessarily in combat themselves, but to bridge stealth bombers onto unsuspecting blingy targets. What people do is they send hunters out to find potential kills, and they will then jump using this Black Ops ship or any of its counterparts to put 20 or 30 stealth bombers on any other ship, and the amount of alpha and generally DPS stealth bombers have will probably liquidate any ship. And that's just really fun. If you haven't done it, do so. Right. We're going to stop here on ship types because then we have to go to a far more amount of details for each ship, and we'll be here for another hour or so. All right, last but not least, John, we're going to briefly touch on playstyles and what to train. If you're under 6 months of age, you will think you're what to train into. To be fair, you can't really go wrong. It all depends on what you want to do in EVE, like many things. My advice to you is grab one of these experienced chaps if you have time, and just ask them what you want to do. Ask them tell them you want to do this and what they advise you to do. You can grab me at any point. Cat here is a good one. Antiza is a good one as well. And you know the risk. Korra is a good one as well. And of course, Honghu, if he comes around, are good people. So grab them and ask them to see what you want to do and what they advise you to do. As a whole, what you want to do determines what you want to train. I would advise you from the start off to train your support skills. These are predominantly your navigation. Hold on a sec. Your engineering skills. I meant your armor skills, your shield skills, your general skills that make you more effective in whatever you do, either PvP or PvE or probing or scanning or making ISK. Once you have that down, then I would advise all of you to cross-train. Take a week, 2-3 weeks, and get all your cruisers from all your factions to 4 at the very least. It doesn't take a long time. You can get battleships to 4 or whatnot quite quickly. Once you have that, then you'll have the option of fitting multiple ships for multiple engagements, and you will learn faster. You will know your enemy once you have sat in his own ship and done what he was trying to do or what he does. So if you want to know how to deal with Kaidas or how to kill Kaidas, become a Kaida yourself. Brawlers, same thing. In EVE Online, once you do something, you will automatically learn how to counter that thing. Train your weapon skills predominantly as a whole, all to level 3 or 4. Doesn't matter if you like missiles, doesn't matter if you like projectiles. I, for example, have a taste and preference for projectiles and Minotaur. Other people, different playstyles, will have different ships. Again, ask around to say, look, I want to do this. I want to do faction warfare. I want to go solo and nullsec. I want to do solo and lowsec. I want to gate camp. I want to become a pirate. I want to become a ganker. Doesn't really matter. And they will tell you where you want to go. And then set up your skill tree for at least a month or 2. And don't be one of those festy little people that changes his skill tree every 20 minutes. Just let it go. Beyond that, make sure you cross-train. I've seen people that stick to one faction for 2-3 years, and at the end, you will not learn as fast. That'd be my advice to you. This brings us to the end of my speaking for this class. Now let's go to the general Q&A questions. And currently, Mumble is open for anyone who wants to talk. And just fire away if you have any questions, or you want to do anything in particular in EVE, and you have any questions about that.
Hamid, just real quick, what do you think about the 4 races? What are they best at? Just sort of round table. What do you like in them?
Predominantly with the Galente, I predominantly will go for their drone capabilities and their blasters. If you are a Galente pilot, you can put a ridiculous amount of DPS in close combat, including your drones. The Thorax is a prime example for a very cheap price tag for like, I don't know, 20 mil. The Thorax is a wonderful thing to learn. You can solo with it even as well. You can even put rails on it. So Galente, drones plus blasters plus armor is a good learning ship for brawling. For the Amar, I love their E-War, and you will love their E-War. You can use their drones and their E-Wars to great effect. If there's two words you want to take off from Amar, it's E-War and drones. And they are armor friendly. So once you learn armor with them, you'll be easier with Galente as well, dictating range. With the Caldari as a whole, you will love kiting with Caldaris. Heavy missiles, for example, and caracals mix very well together. A fleet of 50 or 60 people with heavy missile caracals would, after micro warp drives, can go up to 1,300 in speed and can shoot anything out of 50 to 70 kilometers out. Once you have somebody that knows what they're doing, FCing it, you get a lot of alpha off that as well. And they are really fun ships to have. And if you're fighting a gang of slower ships, you can just run circles around them and murder them one by one. Especially if you have that good dictator pilot that just drive bubbles the bejesus out of them. Last but not least, my favorite among all of them, however, is the Minotaur. The Minotaur is an exceptionally versatile race. You can get it to do a lot of things. Whether it be brawling, or whether it be kiting, The greatest kiter, in my opinion, is the Vagabond. Not necessarily for all the big sizes of ships, but the Vaga as a whole is a fantastic ship, and it does kiting very well, and it will eat up cruisers, smaller frigates and cruisers, slower cruisers as a whole. So that's for example. They all have their wonderfulness. As you play and as you train into it, that's why I insist you cross train. As you cross train and you fly with each and every one race, you will get to see these as a whole and hopefully appreciate them. So I just saw your question as well. Command ships. With a command ship, you will have to get all your leaderships to a certain level. That necessarily is not a bad thing, meaning a lot of times they'll probably put you either in a command position of somewhere so you can pass on boosts, or if you're moving on later on to train into, of course, the new boosters coming out, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Among my opinion, the Sleipnir among all the command ships is the best. The Damnation is not bad either. I mean, I've seen some people use it quite well. It again depends on, like many things in EVE Online, depends on circumstances. Hopefully that answered your question, brother. That's one of the problems of the command destroyers. It's a lot of training that you could do for your support skills and have you be more effective in all the races as opposed to you just getting into a command destroyer. So if you're under, I dare say, if you're under a year or 2 years, don't bother with the command destroyers. There's so much more fun and more relevant things you can train in 100 days. All right, any other questions? Right on, gentlemen. Let us conclude this class. Hopefully it was useful. I apologize if I was forced to talk a bit too much. And hopefully I was coherent, most generally speaking. If not, any other more questions, let's move on, and I will see you guys in space.